This is I Have No Title and I Must Podcast, the podcast where we talk about all aspects of pop culture, from film and TV to books and music and more. And today, I know everyone has at least one TV show that was canceled way too soon. So today, we're going to talk about our picks for TV shows that we think were canceled just a little too soon. And of course, we are your host, Tyler, and with me again, my co-host,
Becca.
Would you like to kick us off?
Well, I actually was going to suggest that you kick us off first because I think I did last time, so I thought I'd let you have the floor first.
Fair enough.
This time.
My first pick was a show from 91 to 93 called Pirates of the Dark Water. It was an animated show. It got 2 seasons before it was canceled. Kind of followed a guy named Ren, who was destined to be king of his realm, and he's trying to gather the pieces of rule so that he can defeat the Dark Water, which is kind of like a sentient black ooze that is taking over the earth. This was kind of canceled because of like ratings, because it had the misfortune of being opposite of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at the time.
Ooh.
And honestly, I think it's a little bit ahead of its time because most shows geared towards that age range at that time were more episodic. Sometimes you'd have multi-part episodes and a few elements that carry over from episode to episode. This was a little bit more serialized, so I think that kind of hurt it with people trying to come in new, because I don't think I even seen it during its original run. I think it was already canceled, and I caught it on reruns that Cartoon Network had before their Toonami blocks.
Now, the name sounds familiar, but I can't say that I have any real familiarity with it. So maybe it just didn't get as much attention or promotion or something. Or like you said, there were other things that were more popular at the time.
I think because of ratings and stuff, they were kind of restructuring, because I think that Turner Broadcasting purchased whatever network it was on at the time. And so they decided to cancel it and switch gears for other Hanna-Barbera projects, SWAT Cats. And so they're just like, yeah, we'll cancel it. We'll go with this new show.
Okay, that being said, is it something that you would recommend people go and check out if they can?
I still have fun with it. I rewatched a few episodes recently. It is, at least as of this recording, on Tubi. So you can go watch it for free. So if it does sound interesting, or you're just like, well, what is this guy talking about? I've never heard of it. Go to Tubi. Completely free. Watch it. Not that many episodes. I think maybe 8 to 12 per season. And there's only 2 seasons. So I don't even know if there's that many on the second season. But again, it is serialized. They were telling a story, and that story is not finished. But it's still fun. Kind of got that swashbuckling kind of fantasy sci-fi blend with a little bit of magic. So it's got a little bit of something all kind of in there together.
Does sound very interesting, and does sound like maybe it was just in the wrong time period.
Yeah. You know. I think 5-10 years later, it would have done a lot better. That and TMNT would have been done with its run. So, But yeah, I think like the main character is kind of like the scroungy prince coming up from the kingdom that needs to be rebuilt, reunited with his long lost father just before his death. And he sets him on this quest, and he ends up with like this thief kind of guy, and then this girl who's kind of practicing sorcery, and run-ins with other pirates, and of course the Dark Water. But kind of interesting show, a little bit ahead of its time, just bad timing when it released, I think.
All right, that does sound interesting. When you mentioned this topic to me, the very first thing that came to my mind was called Dark Shadows, the Revival. Now, old school, horror fans are going to know that the original Dark Shadows was very popular and very, had a good long run. It ran from 1966 to 1971. They tried to bring it back in the 90s. NBC tried to bring it back, and it was called Dark Shadows, the Revival. And it only got 1 season. It starred Ben Cross as Barnabas Collins. Joseph Gordon-Levitt was in it as a young child. And this woman named Joanna Going. And basically, it was in the same, it was basically the same thing as the old Dark Shadows. Barnabas Collins is the vampire. Joanna Going's character comes in to be a nanny to Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and I think there was another child actor on the show. She comes in to kind of be like their nanny and teacher and all that stuff into the mysterious Collins household. And there's your assortment of witches and ghosts and vampires and whatnot, and she gets pulled into that world, and spoiler alert, she is kind of like a a reincarnation of of Barnabas Collins's first love, Josette. And so he becomes very fixated on her. The witch is very jealous of her, Angelique. And so it was kind of this building up of that, of like her discovering these secrets about the Collins family and this love triangle kind of thing. But during its run, it kept getting preempted by breaking news. You know, this was Gulf War era, all this kind of stuff. And so that's one of the things that kept happening, is that it kept getting preempted and moved around or cut off or whatever. And that made the ratings drop. And also people feel like that a lot of people were tuning in for the romance and the mystery, and the promos were making it much more on the horror side, you know, much more about the vampires and the witches and the curses and things. And people feel like if it had gone a little bit into more dark romance territory, it would have had a wider viewership. So, but yeah, it ended on a cliffhanger. You know, it ended on a pretty like knee-jerk kind of cliffhanger. And I was so angry at the time because I watched every episode. I thought it was great. I loved that kind of thing. And I was excited to see where it was going to go. And then it was just like, it just dropped off and it never got picked back up for the second season. So
I hate when these networks and marketing people just mismarket their products. It's killed a lot of movies. It's killed a lot of series. But I don't think I've seen that one. I think I've only seen the Johnny Depp movie adaptation they did.
Yeah. Well, the movie's much more campy. This series tried to take the old series and I think make it a little bit more serious, you know, and it kind of blended the old and the new without going into too much spoiler territory. It does go back into Barnabas's past and like, you know, so it kind of cut between now, well, not now, but the 90s and the old days, you know, Barnabas's previous life and his life with Josette and all that. So I thought it had a very interesting, and it looked good. It looked very dark and gothic and Tim Burton-y and all that, but it just, you know, just kept getting preempted and just didn't pick up the viewership. So, you know, but if you can find it out there, I didn't do the research to see where it is. I have to have it on DVD, I think, but if you like gothic type stuff, it is worth watching. You know, just it was well done. It was well crafted. It's visually interesting, but you will get very frustrated because it's not going to go anywhere because it just built things up that got dropped because it never continued. I
can't speak for the revival or the reboot series, but I think the original is also on Tubi. So again, shout out to Tubi. Spent a lot of time on it.
And that's a good thing about some of these things that got lost back then or didn't pick up viewers back then. A lot of it probably is out there now that new people can go back and find it and appreciate it. So that's a good thing about so many streaming services and so, you know, so much digital availability.
Right, so my next pick, I mentioned SWAT Cats earlier. Well, it's my next pick because it also got unceremoniously canceled. And its initial run was 93 to 95. It also got 2 seasons before being canceled. This one, it's like everyone in the world is cats. And
I like it already.
Yeah. They're all like anthropomorphic cat people. And the 2 main guys run kind of like a junkyard / mechanic auto shop kind of place. And I know at least one of them used to be. I think both of them were like ex-cops. And now they're like crime-fighting vigilantes and they have a fighter jet that they use to take on the bad guys. It is completely insane. Like everything cats. Even one of the guys is a reptile, kind of like the lizard from Spider-Man, but also a cat. But at one point, it was doing really good in the ratings. I think during 94, it was actually the #1 rated animated show. But again, how I mentioned, Turner Broadcasting bought out Hanna-Barbera and their likes. Ted Turner decided that this was too violent. And so toy lines got postponed. The series kind of got postponed. So the episodes came out later during the second season. And so that just kind of killed funding, kind of killed its initiative. And so eventually they decided to cancel it. But I find this a little hypocritical because Ted Turner also kind of championed wrestling on his stations, specifically WCW. And like he would butt heads with the other executives, even though wrestling was hemorrhaging them money at the time. But you can argue that wasn't geared towards kids, but all the action figures and video games says otherwise. So I find that a little hypocritical.
Yes. And that's a fair point. Because I watched wrestling. I watched all kinds of wrestling as a kid. And I think it is very much, geared towards kids. But again, it goes down to like people draw their lines in weird places. I've always made that argument. I've said, to me, movies that are more based in reality, some dramas and war movies and stuff like that, to me are much more horrific and real world kind of terror than the things that get banned or the things that get blacklisted as like being, too violent or whatever. But that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. We could do a whole episode on censorship and
For sure.
But that's not today.
But again, that's another one that I wasn't familiar with, but it sounds like it's something I would enjoy. So, maybe, like we said, this discussion will bring awareness of these things to new people and they can still go back and enjoy what we have of it.
I don't know how much validity there is to it, but I have heard rumors of maybe a SWAT Kats revival. So I don't know if that's true or how far in the works that is, but would definitely be interesting because it was one of those shows that I really liked as a kid because it was just really different. Because it's like, oh, instead of like your traditional superheroes, it's like we have a fighter jet. Why? I don't know. But they had like different kind of like gimmicky missiles and stuff, kind of like how Green Arrow and stuff had their trick arrows. They have their trick missiles, and it's just interesting to see what they would use to do what. Ever.
Well, that's something to keep an eye on, and if they do end up rebooting it or bringing it back, maybe that's something we'll circle back around to. Now, the next one that was on my list is called Miracles, and it was around 2003. It was about 2003 when this came out. It starred Skeet Ulrich. He was coming right off of popularity of movies like Scream and everything, and he was starting to transition into like TV acting and stuff as well. So he was like a big promo factor for it. But the series was kind of meant to be sort of adjacent to things like the X-Files and stuff. But in its particular premise, Skeet Ulrich is a guy who worked for the Catholic Church trying to investigate so-called miracles and unexplained things. But then he has his own near-death experience, his own sort of weird, inexplicable experience. And when he goes to the Catholic Church to try to tell them what personally happened to him, they shut it down. They invalidate it. They make him seem like he's a crazy person. And so he leaves their organization. But now he's like, oh my gosh, there is real stuff out there. Like there's some things I can't explain. And he ends up meeting these other people. One of them was played by a guy named Angus McFadden and a woman named Marissa Ramirez. And they had a group, and I'm not going to attempt to say the name in Latin, but it basically translated to the Brotherhood of Truth, or Brotherhood in Search of the Truth. And so they're kind of like this rogue group that wants to go out and do their own investigations and explorations. And the episodes themselves were based on those searches and those investigations. And some of them kind of seemed like one-offs, very Twilight Zone-y. There was one that still messes with my head to this day, where this airplane kind of goes through these parallel realms where in different versions, different things happen to the plane. Like it survives, it crashes, it's like these people are alive, they're dead. It was a completely mind trippy kind of episode. But then there started also being a thread that connected back to the thing that happened to Skeet Ulrich in the first place. That like something was linked to him. And it was going through this whole story that involved his own personal journey, as well as all these other little investigations that they were on. And there was a point right towards the end that it became very focused on that's where it was going, that everything kind of centered around something with his character and what had happened to him in the beginning. And I guess like kind of a paranormal attachment or something. I can't say too much without spoiling certain things, but a message that he had interpreted in one way got slightly altered for him. He got to see it in a slightly different way, and it kind of changed the whole context. And then you're just like, oh, now what? Because we got no answers really. And again, much the same problem that happened with Dark Shadows is that, again, this was a TV series that was on a network station, and it kept getting preempted by all kinds of real world stuff. Again, Gulf War was still going on. I think the Michael Jackson investigation, the World Series, just all kinds of things kept interrupting it, preempting it. They kept moving its timetable around. People would not be able to find out when it was airing, and its viewership just kept dropping because of that. And I think in the United States, if I'm remembering correctly, they didn't even finish the first season. And I think that I didn't even get to the cliffhanger until it came out on DVD, because I remember finding it on DVD and being like, okay, well, I can watch the rest of the series, but then being like, oh no, this just made it worse. So, and I actually, when I went to Scarefest and I met Skeet Ulrich and didn't get to talk to him for that long. Of course, I had so much ground to cover because I'm such a big Scream fan and I've liked so much other stuff, but I definitely wanted to talk to him about Miracles too and be like, I'm so pissed off that got canceled. And he was saying that he really enjoyed the premise of the show and the character arc that he was on, but it was not a good work environment. He didn't get along with some of the other cast members, and it wasn't, he was making it sound like there were too many cooks in the kitchen or something, and that it probably wouldn't have worked long term anyway. But yeah, that's one that if you like that kind of thing, it's very kind of Twilight Zone-y, very, not as much X-Files. I'd say it's closer to like Twilight Zone or like, kind of parallel reality kind of stuff, some horror thrown in there. But it had some really great episodes. There were some episodes that I will never forget that just stand out in my mind. And so if you like that kind of thing, it is worth checking out, but also again comes with the frustration of it being mishandled and never getting resolved.
I was gonna say that one actually sounds like something I would have watched at the time, but you saying of how they mismanaged it kind of, I guess, explains why I never heard of it until now. Because that 100% sounds like something I would have been watching at the time.
Yeah, go look it up on YouTube or something, and I'm pretty sure like at least the trailers and stuff are out there, if not the whole series. I think the series is available to buy on like DVD. I may even still have my copy. If I do, I'll look for it and see if I can loan it to you or something. But yeah, I loved it. I thought it was well done. It had some really, like I said, individually great episodes that technically could be standalones, I guess, because they kind of resolve what happened within that episode as best they can, but then there are other overarching stories that never get resolved. So
all right. I think we might have some crossover here. If not, I know at least you've heard of this one and probably needs no introduction, but my next one is Invader Zim.
Of course, I know Invader Zim.
So in case for some reason you've never heard of Invader Zim, animated show that was on Nickelodeon, follows Zim, who is an alien invader sent to Earth kind of as punishment to get rid of him. And he's just really bad at his job. And then you got Dib, who's the paranormal investigator, who's correct almost 100% of the time, but no one listens to him. And it's just crazy, dark comedy, still a laugh today. But the reason this one was canceled is a long one. Like, I've seen a whole 20-30 minute thing on YouTube about it, so I'm going to try and condense it as much as possible, but I encourage you to go look into this more. I'm sorry I can't give you the guy I was watching. It was a while ago and not someone I watch regularly, so I don't remember. But essentially, the official reason it was canceled is bad rating. And they thought the direction the show was going, kids would not like it. But the truth of it is, Invader Zim had great ratings. They just didn't have ratings with younger kids that they could sell toys to. And the executives never understood Invader Zim, and they would fight with the writers constantly. And what was supposed to have happened is there's supposed to have been a block of shows geared more towards older teens. But for whatever reason, Invader Zim was the only show made. And so now it was kind of in this limbo of where to put it because it didn't fit with the rest of their shows. But it had a great older teen and young adult audience, but of course not selling toys. So it was initially signed on for a second season. But unfortunately, during the second season, 9/11 happened. And so like the news stations and like network TV ran news nonstop, no commercial breaks And so the parent company that owned those stations also owned Nickelodeon. And so they needed to make cuts everywhere because they did not have the commercial revenue coming in. So the executives are like, I don't like that show anyway, let's cut it. So Invader Zim did not even get its full second season before they canceled it. And they even quit airing it. You didn't even get the full second season or what episodes they had finished until the DVD release. And it wasn't until like years later that they even put those out on TV to watch for free.
I did watch Invader Zim at the time, but I don't think I was as aware of like what was going on behind the scenes and why it kind of disappeared or whatever. But what's interesting about it is I think it did make enough of an effect on people that loved it that it never kind of went away.
Yeah.
And it is having a resurgence. And what's interesting, as soon as you said it, is my fiance's daughter is 11 and she's discovering things. It's so funny. She'll come to us and be like, oh, do you know what Hot Topic is? Have you ever heard of MCR? And all this stuff. And we're like Aslan, don't speak to me of the old magic. I was there when it was written and all this. But she started wearing Invader Zim stuff. She loves Gur. She's got her big Gur collection going. And she came to us about Invader Zim. And I was like, yeah, I know Invader Zim, And since then, it just seems like it's been everywhere. Like it's just been, I've seen stuff online. We took her to Hot Topic and there was a lot of stuff available. It's back in the markets. It's online. It's like it's having a resurgence. And I think rightfully so. It's got a lot of appeal. And I think it's great that the kids of now are getting to like discover it.
Yeah, I was really hoping we were going to get a revival when Netflix made Enter the Florpus, but so far it doesn't look like it.
Well, never say never. It could happen again. Another thing to keep an eye on, but that one I would definitely say, check it out. If you're one of those people that for whatever reason has never watched an episode of Invader Zim, do yourself a favor. Watch it. It's great. It holds up. It's kind of timeless. It was great then. It's great now. And yeah, one to keep an eye on for sure.
Especially if you love the dark, weird, stupid humor.
Mm-hmm. And everybody's going to have their own probably character that they gravitate to. I love Gaz. Gaz is sort of my favorite character on there. She's not the main character, but every time she shows up, I really like her. A lot of people can probably relate to Dib, just like he's doing his best out there, but it's just like, damn it.
I was going to say, one of the best lines still comes from Miss Bitters, where Dib comes in, I keep seeing these strange, dark, horrible visions. It's called life, Dib. Now sit down.
Yeah. There was like something that's still very relatable about a lot of that. So that's a very good one. I'm glad you included that one on this list.
Yeah, I actually wrote a paper in English my sophomore, junior year in high school. That's probably the highest grade I ever got in that English class. Just talking about how stupid Invader Zim was.
I've got something even more embarrassing. When I was younger and one of our English teachers made us journal. We had to write a journal or like so many pages per week about something we were interested in. And I did this whole presentation once about New Kids on the Block. So, I went through every member of New Kids on the Block and all this stuff about them and my favorite songs. And it was very cringe. But I got a good grade on it because I was very thorough. But yeah, it was a different time, kids. It was a different time. And I have now silenced. I've brought it to silence.
It's like I don't feel as bad now. I don't feel like such a loser anymore.
Yeah, Invader Zim is definitely cooler than New Kids on the Block. I can say that. Yeah. But I was a teenage girl. I was a teenage girl at the time, and everybody had to have their new kid on the block that they were gonna marry someday. And mine was Donnie Wahlberg, even though he's like so weird to me because he was the rebel and the guy with the nose ring and the bad boy, but now he's very conservative and makes a lot of boring cop drama kind of stuff. So I'm like, Donnie, what happened? It would have never worked, man.
Yeah, but without turning the whole show into Invader Zim, I think that's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Now, my next thing that I had on the list, I actually thought of because of Miracles, because they were kind of bookends to each other. It was a show called Mysterious Ways. And it was on a cable channel. I don't remember which one it was originally on, maybe like TBS or something like that. It ended up moving to something called PAX, I think. But it was, I think, probably a little closer to trying to stay a little bit more like a different version of the X-Files. It, again, was like this little investigatory group, and they would go out and try to find proof of things but yeah, it's very similar to like Miracles. But what I remember about it, because I did watch it, I watched it fairly consistently. I didn't like it as much as Miracles. It wasn't, the people on it weren't as recognizable. It wasn't as catchy in certain ways, as flashy, but it did have some interesting premises. And what I remember about it is some of it was based on things that we're all familiar with. There was an episode where they went out and did an investigation where ghost children were supposed to push your car, and we've all heard those stories.
Oh, yeah.
And they would put the powder on the
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I watched
the
that
bumper and push, and something would push the car. So a lot of it, as I remember, was based on real like paranormal stories or urban legends or things like that. And they kind of just did their own take on those things. And so if you liked that kind of thing, if you like mystery, paranormal, anything like that, it had an appeal, but I don't think it had, like I said, like as much dynamic and star power and stuff. So, and then it did get changed from one network to another, and it just kind of faded off. I wouldn't even, it's been so long since I watched an episode of that I can't really say whether it would hold much appeal now. It did to me at the time, because I just liked anything that was in that genre. I was just looking for anything that was interesting in that way. I liked all those kind of shows like X-Files, Miracles, and Mysterious Ways. And it actually ran for longer than Miracles. Mysterious Ways got 2 complete seasons from 2000 until 2002. But it just kept, kind of dropping off. It was never consistent, and it only got its 2 seasons, and they decided to not take it any further. So there you go.
I vaguely remember that. Might have seen a few episodes here and there.
And if I remember right, just because I was such a weird pop culture person at the time, the lead actor, I may have wrote his name down. It's like Adrian something, I think. I didn't write it down. I had no idea who he was or whatever, but I think there was kind of like a weird thing that happened during the time that it was on, because his claim to fame wasn't so much himself, but he was married to one of the Dixie Chicks. And I think they went through a divorce while that TV show was on. He was kind of like in the news because of that, because of their breakup and stuff. So that was a weird little, probably didn't help the viewership, because I think a lot of the Dixie Chicks fans didn't like him, and maybe there was a little bit of boycotting that show because of that. I don't know. Weird time. What's your next?
I promise not all my stuff is cartoons, but most of it. Because I'm an adult in the same way that tomatoes are fruits, like technically. But my next pick is Reboot. And I mean the original, like 94 show, not whatever garbage Netflix tried to pass off as a reboot of Reboot, because we're not even going to talk about it. But the initial run was 3 seasons from 94 to 98. And it got a 4th season in 2001. But this was like the first ever full CG TV show. And it kind of took place inside of a computer. So you got a lot of like computer terms network. You have like the guardian that protects the computer, and they're facing off against the user who plays games and destroys the computer and the viruses and whatnot. But it was one of those weird things. Like I said, it got the first 3 seasons, and season 3 kind of had a satisfying ending, but then they kind of came back with the 4th season. But it was in this weird kind of in-between era, because I think Disney was in the process of buying out ABC, which is where the show was initially ran on. And the 4th season was supposed to be 3 movies broken up into 12 30-minute episodes with a 13th special to kind of tie it all together. But that was an expensive show to make, especially for the time period. So they needed to cut costs with the mergers and acquisitions. So it got cut back from the 12 30-minute shows to 8 21-minute episodes. And so they had to do a lot of rewrites, and it ended on a huge cliffhanger. and they ended up not picking it back up to finish out. This is one of those, the first season is kind of a little bit rough to watch. It finds its footing in the second season, although I still like the first season too. It's more fun and playful, but kind of gets more serious as it goes on. But unless you're okay with the cliffhanger, because season 4 was good, don't watch past season 3 because it does kind of wrap it up a little bit there. But if you don't mind ending on a cliffhanger, definitely watch season 4. I also think this one is, at least of time of recording, on Tubi as well. So you can watch all the episodes there. But I recommend it. It was a weird one because, again, first ever full CG. It's kind of groundbreaking for the time. Kind of dated now. But this is one of the few that I actually own all the episodes on physical media. So I highly recommend checking it out because it was very different for the time and still kind of different now. So definitely.
Yeah, I don't have any familiarity with that. So that's something, I may have to look into. It sounds interesting, but I don't really recall anything about it. But again, that's why it's cool that, we're covering some of these things because we can all discover something new that we might like.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those that I watched its initial run a little bit and have vague memories of it. But Cartoon Network kind of, like it did with Pirates of the Dark Water and stuff, kind of brought it back into focus. And that's when it kind of picked up with that last season. But again, where the acquisitions and stuff were happening and budget cuts, it just didn't survive it. Because I've seen lots of people online like, I didn't know there's a 4th season out. And now I regret watching it. Not because it was bad, just because I don't have closure now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just know if the first season you're like, this is kind of campy, fun, it does get more serious later on. And it kind of goes not super dark. Like you can still let your kids watch it, but it does get kind of dark.
Well, the next thing that I have on my list is, I'm sure a lot of people, if you haven't seen it, you're at least, about it in the zeitgeist, was The Following. And of course, like I said, I can always tie things back to Scream. And so The Following, of course, was the concept and everything. It originated with Kevin Williamson, the original writer of Scream. And it actually came about because he kind of decided to take an idea that he had for Scream 3 that the studio wouldn't let him do. Because the studio, Scream 3, spoiler alert, if you guys don't know, was going to be the Cult of Stu. This is still a thing that gets discussed to this day, but that's literally what it was going to be, is Stu Macher was going to have a fan club, basically, who is like, we will carry on. We will become an army of ghost faces and kill in the name of Stu. That was kind of an early premise for Scream 3, and the studio shut that down real quick.
Yeah, real life kind of ruined that.
And was like, there's no way we would touch that with a 30-foot pole. So then Kevin Williamson's like, yeah, but I really like the idea. And I want to do something with it. And it evolved and became what The Following became. Is it centered around a serial killer named Joe Carroll, who was like a genius level, very charismatic killer. And he developed a very loyal cult to himself. It basically centered around Kevin Bacon's character, Ryan Hardy, had a personal vendetta with this killer, and then his cult, and trying to unmask all the cult and shut the cult down and, all that kind of stuff. It was very popular in the beginning because it had that star power. It had Kevin Bacon. It had a good production, Kevin Williamson behind it, and some other people that would become stars were in that series as well. Shawn Ashmore was in it. Valerie Curry. Both of them ended up showing up in The Boys later on and doing a lot of other work. But at that time, they were lesser characters in this series. And it started off really strong, but over time, in season 2 started to drop off. It started off really strong with an average of 10 million viewers per week. But over time, it started to drop off. And by season 3, it was down to about 2 million viewers a week. And this is one that I have very mixed feelings about because I loved it. I watched it every time it was on. I was glued to it. But I would have frustrations during it because it would lose its focus sometimes. And the main story was with Joe Carroll. The dynamic between Ryan Hardy and Joe Carroll was the essential thing. But as what tends to happen in cults, you get other people who get their own power trips. And so there started to be lesser villains. Oh, well, now we're switching the focus. There in season 2, I think there was a guy named Roderick who was actually a detective or whatever, but he was secretly in the cult or whatever. And I thought, oh, now this could get interesting. I thought, and then they just really didn't go anywhere with it. And by season 3, they had completely changed the arc to a different villain, a guy named Theo that was played by Michael Ealy. And I will give it to Michael Ealy that he took this character who wasn't the main villain and played him so like creepy and charismatic that he did the best he could with that material. And I thought he was a good villain, but I'm like, why are we on him now? Because we started out very different. And I think it kind of jumped the shark in a way because it didn't keep its focus. And I think that's part of the reason it dropped in viewership. And so I always wanted another season so they could fix it.
That's interesting because I know sometimes you lose subplots all the time, but to completely jump from one villain to the other without any in between does seem weird.
Well, I mean, there was an evolution there and there were personal things that happened and I can't remember all the plots and details. Now, by that point, I'll be honest and I'll say, I don't know if Joe Carroll had been eliminated at that point, if maybe he had died or something. And I can't even remember if he was still around at all. But I remember everything kind of shifted to this guy named Theo. And I was like, yeah, I don't know what they're doing with that. But I always felt like there was a way they could have had another season and tried to redeem it and made it, And another thing with that one is it's almost like the Batman thing. The more that Ryan Hardy pursued this cult and the more they would come after the people that he loved and stuff, the darker he would get to the point that he kind of went rogue and was becoming almost as dark as the people he was chasing. And, so it was almost kind of like that Batman thing of trying to get him to break his own moral compass. That was part of what the cult was too, was like indoctrinating people enough to say like, hey, we all should embrace the darkness or whatever. We all have it in us. And it was about trying to break his character as well. And there was a lot of compelling, it's Kevin Bacon. So he was really good in that role. Every time he would like go a little closer to the dark side, the fans would actually love it. They kind of loved the dark side Ryan Hardy. And I think there was a potential with that even if they eliminated Joe Carroll, they could have done stuff with like Kevin Bacon's character, like his journey that could have been interesting. But I think it just kind of got lost in its own sauce. But that being said, there's still some really great episodes. It's still really well crafted, well acted. So maybe the first couple seasons would be better because after that, it does kind of get convoluted and astray from where it probably should have stayed. But I would have liked to have seen it redeem itself. It's sad to me that it kind of ended on its worst season. And I would have liked to have seen it have another good season to kind of undo some of that damage, but that'll never happen. So
I'll do one more. So I said they're not all cartoons, but I don't think we're going to get to all of them. Time reasons. If you guys like this, I definitely have enough to do a part 2 or like revisit this. And of course, you can always give us your own suggestions in the comments. That'd be fantastic. But my last pick, and this one is still sore. I almost didn't put it on there because I was still so mad about it. But at the same time, couldn't let it go. The Venture Brothers. Started in 2004, went to 2018, and got 7 seasons. They were working on the 8th and then ended up getting canceled in 2020 officially. And of course, a lot of fan outcry came through, so they did get a movie to tie it up, but the movie was fine, but it still sucks that it had to end this way. So the official reason it was canceled is because the Venture Brothers used a traditional animation style still. So it took longer to produce episodes, hence why there's only 7 seasons between 2004 and 2018. And it's also more expensive and time consuming. So they're like, we'll cut it. But there are rumors that some of the higher ups did not like Doc Hammer, who was, if you don't know, one of the co-creators of the show and one of the writers. And they said that he was kind of mean and irritable to some of the lower level people, but it also sounds like a he said, she said thing. It sounds like they were harassing him because the executives told them to, because he's apparently riding too slow and he was getting annoyed. So he pretty much told them to get lost. So who knows? My theory is that Warner Brothers and Discovery had their merger at this point. David Zaslav, who was the CEO of Discovery and also the one in charge of, in my opinion, ruining Discovery Channel with all of its cheap, trashy reality shows. They're cheap to produce and earned enough money to keep going instead of putting out anything of substance. And so when the merger happened, he got put in charge of everything. And so, of course, he started cutting costs everywhere because anything that looked anywhat too expensive, he trashed. And Warner Brothers animation department got hit the most. So that got canceled. Even during HBO Max's streaming, for whatever reason, even shows they owned the rights to got taken off the streaming at the time, which made no sense to me because it's already done. It's already paid for. It's free money. You own it. You're not paying anyone else for it except for server space. So it just seems to me like he just made a lot of bad decisions, and that was one. But I got ahead of myself. If you've not seen The Venture Brothers, it follows Hank and Dean, and a lot of it is kind of a spoof, parody, satire of the old adventure shows like Johnny Quest from like the 60s. And you even see some of the crossovers with the Johnny Quest characters or likenesses of, because where it was a Warner Brothers thing, they had access to the Hanna-Barbera cartoons, but you kind of follow their adventures and all their mishaps. And their dad was like a washed up, used to be boy adventurer, now washed up super scientist. It's just endlessly hilarious, very smartly written, like endlessly rewatchable. I try to rewatch it at least once a year, and I'm still finding things that I have missed. And I've been watching it since its original release. So highly recommend checking it out. And as I mentioned with Reboot, of being the few shows that I own all the episodes of, Venture Bros is the other. So highly recommend checking it out.
I have some familiarity with that one. I know that I watched it in the beginning, but I think I'm one of those people that just kind of lost touch with it and didn't know how long it actually went on. But I did like it. I did really like it. I guess I just kind of didn't keep up with it as much. But what I do remember of it, I did really enjoy. So that's something that maybe I would go back and revisit.
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems, is that where they did do the animation style the way they did, and like the creators were kind of perfectionists. So it's like, we're not going to make the episodes just to make the episode. So you didn't get a season every year. But it got to the point where Rick and Morty and shows like that, where they're new kind of pretty cash cows, and it was endlessly popular. So they made the decision to keep that, cancel the other. But I don't know if you can watch all of them yet. But on a YouTube, I think on the Adult Swim YouTube page, or maybe its own page now, they're doing weekly releases of the episodes, so you can kind of watch them as they were released on TV on YouTube for free. So again, you might not be able to just binge watch all of them, but they are accessible. And I know they've got full like collections now. You can buy one box set and get all the episodes minus the movie, I think, like at Walmart and wherever you can find the DVDs and stuff. So definitely don't sleep on that.
All right. My last one, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because I only have it listed as an honorable mention. And it's a thing called Wayward Pines. I believe it was on Fox. If I'm remembering correctly, it aired on Fox. But it could have been another station. I'm not sure. It was created, conceptualized by M. Night Shyamalan. And that's the reason that I watched it. Because again, I'm just a fan of like the weird, the unusual, anything like that. And I'm very hit and miss with Shyamalan. He's an enigma to me. I don't understand how he can be so good sometimes and so off on others. But I always give his stuff a chance because I like enough of it to do that. And when I heard about him doing this weird sort of TV venture, I was like, okay, I'm in. It starred Matt Dillon. Matt Dillon was the main star. And he was going through some personal things in his life, and he, kind of fall from grace kind of thing. And he ends up in this weird little town called Wayward Pines. And he kind of gets sucked into it. Kind of almost, I guess, like, your basic, like anything like that, like Twin Peaks or whatever. It was kind of like you just find yourself in this bizarre place and weird things happening and things don't make sense. And it had a really great cast. Juliette Lewis was in it, Toby Jones.
Is that the one based off the book series?
Yes, that's what I was getting to, is that M. Night Shyamalan kind of took this book and thought of a way to make it this sort of TV series kind of thing. He had a concept for that. But where it went wrong for a lot of people is it started to go astray from just the book material. There wasn't enough in the book material to do what they wanted to do with it to make it this expanded series. So it kind of started jumping the shark and looking for ways to evolve into something bigger than the source material. And that's why it kind of ran out of steam. But it did get 20 episodes, which aired in between 2015 and 2016. Again, if you like that kind of weird Shyamalan mystery kind of stuff, it is an interesting watch. It's not necessarily the best thing in the world, but it did have elements that were good, very well acted, well crafted. But again, I can see why it didn't get bigger than it did and why it just kind of ended up killing itself, basically. But if you like that kind of thing, it is worth like maybe revisiting just for the weirdness of it.
I've not seen the TV show myself, but I can say Wayward Pine series by Blake Crouch that's based off of. Excellent books. I think there's 3 of them. If you were a fan of that kind of Twin Peaks meets X-Files kind of thing, definitely check them out.
And maybe that's something I need to do, is read the books, because I liked the TV series, but I felt like it was a little bit off. So I would like to compare it to the original source material that inspired it. So
for me, I liked them, but I think the first book was an easier read because there's so much of a mystery. Like, what's going on? What's going on? By the second book, there's still a little bit of a mystery because there's still other stuff going on for sure. But it's like the mystery from the first one had some light shed on it. So to me, I wasn't as hungry for the second book and the third one. But don't let that put you off of them. They're great. I'd recommend them.
Okay, maybe that's one where we really should have just stuck with the original source material and not ventured off into some other form. That's always a debate. Sometimes the original source material just cannot be translated. Dark Tower, perfect example of that too. I know that's a whole different discussion, but yeah, sometimes it really is better to just stick with the books or the original media and not try to make it in some other form. It's just not as adaptable or not done well sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes a little bit of both.
But yeah, that was sort of the last one that came to my mind on this particular subject. And like I said, it was just an honorable one, but that's about all I got on that.
So to wrap up, something we're trying to do new here is something that's like what's going on that's buzzworthy, that's maybe not in the same topic or vein of what the main episode's about, but what's going on now, maybe stuff for future things or whatnot. But today we're going to set that aside and pay our tribute and respects to Hayden Panettiere, who has sadly passed away. I think most of you will know her from Scream or Heroes or her various voice acting roles, but very sad to hear. So I know you wanted to say a few things.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. I have so much, love for pop culture and everything that it's always on my radar when a celebrity passes. But some of them, it's just like, yeah, it's out there in the realm, but I don't have as much of a personal reaction to it. But I did have more of a personal reaction to this one because for me, I'm a Scream 4 defender to the hilt. Scream 4 is my second favorite Scream film. I will die on that hill. And I love the cast of that one. And Hayden is a lot of the reason that I loved that film. I think I loved Kirby so much because she has that sparkle. She's very fun and spunky and the cool girl you want to hang out with, but she's also got this smarts and grit and tenacity. It's like she was just such a well-developed character, because she's like the party girl, but she's also like the nerdy girl that knows all the horror trivia and I thought she would make a great, when the scenes with her and Sydney, she could be a new Sydney. She's a final girl. She has it. She has that sparkle. So I felt like she was really a standout in that. And then I was one of the people that was the most excited to find out that she was coming back for Scream 6. I was like, yeah, I thought it was kind of dumb at first. I'm like, nah, Kirby's supposed to be dead. But then I liked the idea of her being that survivor and being that person that stared death in the face and came back and was like, I don't want to be afraid of the monsters. I want to chase the monsters. I want to catch the monsters. And I felt like they did such a good job with that. And she did such a good job stepping into a more mature version of that character and still keeping a lot of the same core elements that she had. But I definitely feel like she just stole a lot of the scenes that she was in. She was just like a magnetic force. And I was really hoping that she would be a character they would return to if in future installments. I felt like she'd be a way to get it back on track and take it back to something familiar without having to just repeat the Sydney storylines or whatever. Felt like her character had some potential. And I loved, we play Till Dawn quite a bit. And I love her character, in that. I love the work that she did in that. Everything that I've seen, of her interviews and everything, I know she had a lot of demons behind the scenes, a lot of dark stuff, but she just always seemed so vivacious and fun and relatable. And it was just a gut punch to find out that she passed. It's just very sad because I think she had a lot more to offer.
But with that, I think we'll wrap up proper. Let us know in the comments what your favorite canceled TV shows are that you think were canceled too soon. Let us know if you want us to revisit this topic, because I've definitely got more I could talk about. Some that I already have written down that I didn't get to, and plenty more that I can draw from. And be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on our social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, see ya.